Hello, fellow armchair generals, and everyone else who may be watching this video. This is Gamer1745 here, and I just got finished watching TIK's The Real Reason Why Hitler Had to Start World War II, and this is my response to it. And I don't do well reading a script, but I like to have a conversation with the viewers, and I did take some notes, so I will respond to the video with some of my thoughts on it. But before we get into that, if you're new here, please subscribe to the video, and of course I'd love you to like the video. You could hate it, dislike it too if you feel the need, but I would really appreciate that, as well as what we've learned is really important is to share this on other social media if you would be so kind. I think this is a very, very important discussion. And okay, TIK's The Real Reason Hitler Had to Start World War II. Like I say, I don't do well, and I'm repeating myself here already, reading a script. Whenever I do, it sounds really stilted and bad, but I think I do all right with a conversation. I guess I can give you the headline so those that are only here for a few seconds can go away. Generally, his conclusions, generally speaking, and mostly, I agree with. Some of his intro was rubbing me the wrong way on some of the stuff, but I think that is part of his sort of building the hype title of the video. So let's first get into some of my quibbles with the reasons for his starting out. He talks, and some of it a little unclear to me whether he's talking that this is, he's sort of intermixing what the traditional historians have said, and that why Hitler started World War II, and that he doesn't think that these historical constructs of Hitler starting World War II are correct. Okay, I'm going to state a potentially very controversial statement, but no, Hitler did not start World War II in 1939 when he invaded Poland. Okay? Either Britain started World War II in 1939 as a reaction to Hitler's invasion of Poland, or Hitler starts World War II in March of 1938. What? Where? What? Okay. This sort of gets back to what are Hitler's two primary goals. TIK goes into the shrinking market theory, and that is a secondary reaction to his two primary goals. And TIK does, with the first one, really acknowledge that Hitler's primary goal is to unite the German people. Okay, that is the core principle of Hitler's National Socialism, and we will get into some of that a little bit more, how that relates to national and socialism, but is to unite the German people. He has this is the most core, the most central thing that he feels he must do. The only country that he doesn't invade that has a significant traditional historical German populace, saying that is, and from the sort of Hitler view, we're not talking about the New World in America or Germans, which there were before World War II starts, Germans living down in Argentina and other places, talking sort of about in Europe and where the map is currently focused. And I'm not editing and doing all kinds of nice, bringing in historical leader images. I guess we can click here and go, hey, there's Hitler. Yes. So he's not looking at Germans, shall we say, living very far abroad, but Germans living in this area. The one place he doesn't invade is Switzerland, and I believe, both think and believe, those one has reasons behind it, the other is just gets to a belief, is because David Frankfurter kills Wilhelm Gustloff, who has sort of two roles. He is, I believe, a dual citizen, definitely a citizen of Germany, dual citizen with citizenship with Switzerland. He is a primary resident in Switzerland. He is in charge of the German Ausland Association or element within the Nazi Party. Basically, Germans living abroad, and that, as well as the German outreach to the Germanic peoples, and I'm saying that slightly different, in Switzerland. The Ausland Association is specifically dealing with German internationally recognized citizens living abroad, as opposed to, say, in which they were sort of collecting, say, historical Germanic communities left over from the Austro-Hungarian Empire living in Austria, or I mean Hungary, sorry, but living there. And yeah, Hitler didn't, well, he did sort of invade at some point, but more of a technicality there. So it wasn't so much dealing with, say, the Sudeten Germans or Austrians or other, peoples that hold other citizenship documents. The Ausland organization deals with German citizens living abroad. So Wilhelm Gustloff has that sort of dual role. I think killing him shuts down, for the time being, in the time of the war, actions against Switzerland. So yay for David Frankfurter. He should be a Swiss national hero. They should put a huge statue to him up in Switzerland. Right. Okay, so Hitler's goal is unite the German people. The second goal on Hitler's list of basic fundamental goals is to defeat the real enemy. And as the more I study and research, I've read some of the stuff in some of the books, partially fully, in TIK's list of books of Hitler starting the war, and it's very economics focused. I'm focused less on economics than TIK is, or some of these other authors. The real enemy is the Jews. That is the real enemy of the German peoples. It's comparable. It's not the same at all, but it's comparable to Chiang Kai-shek saying the real enemy of China is Mao Zedong and the communists. The Japanese invasion is just sort of like a surface skin disease that's temporary to the problem. Sure, the Japanese are killing lots and lots of Chinese. Sure, they need to be defeated, but they are only going to be a temporary nuisance if the communists get in charge. Permanency in the great scope of history is a fallacy, but it would be a real enemy, a real defeat for China if the communists get into power. And we might be able to see the difference between, say, Hong Kong, which is right there on the edge between whether they're controlled by the People's Communist Party or not. And they're doing, as I'm making this, they're doing various demonstrations in Hong Kong. If you don't know about that, you should look at China Uncensored YouTube video channel. Very good. They've been covering it. And you can also look at Taiwan and see how radically better those two places are than the most of China is, and all of that to give sort of the idea that Chiang Kai-shek was right, that the communists were a greater long-term danger to China than the temporary danger of the Japanese. So Hitler sees, I don't know, the temporary danger of the French or somebody, the Americans or somebody conquering Germany is a temporary condition that may need to be suffered, say at the end of World War I. And you may have redrawings of borders. Obviously, this is, well, more or less the redrawing of the border at the end of World War I, which we're looking at here. But these are temporary setbacks to the Germans, and that this is, I'm again trying to explain Hitler's view, how I understand how Hitler viewed these things. TIK in his video, which I would recommend you go watch both the video and also why they don't teach this, his views, and we'll get to that in school. Those are both very important videos. So I'm sort of lost my train of thought. Okay, this is how I currently understand Hitler's viewpoint and the sort of elite and not. Oh yeah, TIK quotes Hitler in his book. Well, Hitler and I have not fully read Mein Kampf. I don't know if any of you have ever tried to get through it. It was many, many years ago. I tried to get through an English version of it. I just couldn't get through reading all of it. It's not an easy book to read. Just not well written. And I have not read his second book, I'll say. But Hitler, if you look at Hitler's quotes over his, verifiable quotes that Hitler made over his career, they are often contradictory. So you can't take Hitler's word entirely for what he believes. He will say to one audience what he thinks he needs to say to get their support, and then go, because this is before the internet and everybody reading everything and understanding everything, go to a different audience and say something to a different audience that's contradictory to get their support. So he will lie. So I don't put as much weight on some of Hitler's statement just because Hitler said this, then he must. No, Hitler says all kinds of things. You have to look at what Hitler does. The real enemy, the long-term enemy, is the Jews. That's what he sees them. And he sees them, and if you look at the sort of original vampire movie, Nosferatu, he sees Jews as vampires. Not in a literal, but in a literal, notice I'm contradicting myself here, sense. He sees them not in that they're going to turn into bats and fly away, not that they're going to somehow bite someone in the neck and suck their blood, but vampiric through breeding with the German peoples and other peoples, infecting genetically disease of Judaism with other people. So he sees them in a mythological way as a vampiric peoples. He's wrong about that, in my opinion, and Hitler is evil and wrong and all kinds of things. But this is Hitler's viewpoint. Now, he sees werewolves as the protectors of the German people. And you can look at before Nazism really sort of takes off, some sort of werewolf type gangs operating in the French occupied zone, and look at various mythological ancient German folk traditions that they like to pluck little things out of obscurity in history and try to make it bigger, but that somehow the werewolves of the forest were the protectors of the German peoples. So this does get into some sort of modern movies as well, but this is Hitler's viewpoint, is the real enemy of the German people and hence mankind, or at least as he wants to see us, the good mankind, is the Jews. And those two things are his big goal, is to deal with the two, unite the German peoples and defeat the real enemy, of the Jews. These are his overriding fundamental elements. Now, he talks about starting the war economy in 1933. Reichstag fire. I would say that that's a little too early. I would say, and he does quote Schacht there briefly, Helmar Schacht, the economics minister. Hey, we can get a photo of him, don't we? Oh, well, we can go here. Here, Helmar Schacht, who's now our economics minister. He really wasn't a Nazi, but he agreed with a lot of the Nazi policies. But he was looking for a way for Germany's future without a war. I would say he and his policies, he is the person of the Nazi hierarchy in government. You know, he's not like a core member of the Nazi Party. I don't know if he ever had Nazi Party membership. I don't think he did. But he may have, but I don't know on that small detail. He was trying to look for a way out for Germany without a war, but he definitely wanted a stronger Germany. It's his removal as economics minister functionally. It's, I guess, Walter Funk is put in his place, but he's really a puppet. For, again, we can look at the other Hermann Göring here. No, where's not? That's Lay. Why did I? There's a fat guy in a uniform. Oh, here's Hermann Göring here, as a armaments minister. With functionally, he's taking over significant elements of the economy with a 4-year plan. Now, here's where I really start to agree with, and so Hitler did not want to start World War II. He just didn't want to start World War II. TIK says people don't follow madman. Well, Hitler wasn't mad in the sense that he was out of touch with reality. He was not out of touch with reality until 1945 or something. Until at some point, losing the war is so much, he's literally out of touch with reality. You can look at that, like scenes in the movie Downfall, in which, where's Steiner with the divisions and whatever. He's out of touch with reality at some point. But leading up to all this, he's not mad in the sense that he's out of touch with reality. He may be, and again, I'll say he's very an evil person, but he may be mad in some of his views of how things work. Again, TIK is really functioning or looking at economies. And that is an important element. It could be a fundamental element of the way Hitler's viewing it. But Hitler is also looking at it in a mythical viewpoint as well. And so he's keeping all of that going. Now, I'm thinking here. How I should take this, and this is slight maybe variations from what TIK was saying in his well reasoned out video. This isn't to slam him or say he's all wrong. This is just my address based on what I watched on his video. He talks about National Socialism as a type of socialism, and some people in American media, particularly Glenn Beck, likes to go, hey, Hitler was a socialist. See, they have National Socialism in, the name of the thing. And they do, and they're right. And in fact, and then other people I say, well, if you think Nazis are socialists, I don't even want to hear what you have to say. I've at least one person basically asked, do you think Nazis are socialists? And after some comment, and I go, well, and I didn't know which way this person was going to go with this. Hitler calls himself the National Socialism. They have National Socialism in the name of the party. So yes, they're a form of National Socialism. But I did say they are not a Marxist form of socialism. And then that person, no, then I have no interest in what you have to say. Basically believing that I don't have a touch with the reality that person understands, so he doesn't care what I have to say. He or she, I don't know. Socialism. If you're going to narrowly define socialism as Marxism, and I have a lot of various socialists out there, or people that vote or support socialist parties that aren't Marxists say, oh no, I'm a socialist, but I'm not a Marxist. Okay. If you want to narrowly define it as Marxism or Marxist-Leninism, then no, Hitler was not a socialist. But Hitler was a socialist. Not everybody who believes in social welfare programs, even big, burdensome social welfare programs, is a socialist. Socialism is a type of collectivism. Collectivism is on a because of reality, is on a graduating graph, which I was editing videos here, maybe on one extreme of the graph is either, hardcore libertarians or hardcore anarchists, in that there is no collective responsibility for anything. On the other hand, on the other extreme, up on the other extreme of it, is a totalitarian state kind of thing, in which the state governs everything. Now, socialism, if you're looking at it from either an idealistic or a sort of Marxist viewpoint, is a leveling ideology. Everyone should be equal. Everyone should have an equal amount of money. Everyone should have an equal amount of living space. Everyone should have an equally different job. Everyone should be everything equal. There should be no nails sticking up out of the floor. Everyone hammered into the exact same equal level. It's leveling. Leveling predates socialism, or Marxism, I should say. Leveling predates Marxism. There is the whole levelers movement in England. That is where the term comes. They want to level society, equality. A lot of the original levelers believed in private property, but no one should have more private property than somebody else. They weren't Marxists, but they were levelers. Marxism, Marxist-Leninism, Maoism are leveling ideologies, dealing with more than just the economy, but dealing heavily with the economy. Now, fascism and National Socialism, and I believe they are two distinct things, are not leveling ideologies, but both are socialism, or a socialistic ideology at a minimum. Okay? Both are socialistic at a minimum, if not socialism, but a non-leveling socialism. Fascism, and we're looking a little bit more in the ideal than in the practice. So don't throw up, if you want to respond to this, and I'd love you to respond to this video, throw up, well, X, Y, Z, and whether and we're particularly looking at Italy, wasn't the case. Well, we can look at what the ideal of fascism and how it was put into practice. Yes, we can look at that in communism, but most of the time, reality doesn't meet, idealism doesn't meet reality. Mussolini wants a centrally planned economy. Okay? That is a fundamental element of fascism. So they want, and there's a lot of social responsibility in fascism. Okay? So he wants a centrally planned economy. Hitler does not want a centrally planned economy. Hitler is an anti-capitalist. Hitler is an anti-Marxist. Okay? He is anti-capitalist. He is anti-Marxist. But Hitler, at his core of his being, and you can see this, and I don't care what he says in any speech at any time, I don't care, especially if you look at the end of the Nazi regime when everything is being nationalized and centrally planned under Speer. That is to fight a war. That is put under an extreme condition. That is not what Hitler wants. Hitler wants conflict. Hitler believes in his core of his being that conflict is healthy. He believes conflicts, that which does not kill you makes you stronger. Hitler wants competing agencies within the Reich, government agencies, competing agencies within the party, though the party and the government, as time goes on, gets more and more blurred lines. But he wants competing parties. He wants competing Nazi officials. He wants competing industries. But he doesn't want capitalism. He doesn't want the state daily control of the means of production. Now, I'm saying this very carefully. And they point out, TIK points out several things, including the Schacht quote, of how they were able to, he points out nationalizing Juncker's aircraft factory, when they did not do what the state needed them to do. Hitler and his National Socialism believes that everything needs to be done in the benefit of the race. And that's his nationalism. His nationalism is racism. And this is where a lot on the left, going back to Marxism, is anti-nationalism. And we often find, why is that wall racist? Because that wall is nationalistic in America. And nationalism, which they don't want to say it, or patriotism, because it's patriotism to the nation, as opposed to nationalism, the ideology, but Franco had, is in itself inherently racist. And that's what they believe. They believe national belief, the idea of the nation is inherently racist, and they want to eliminate that. So anything, whether it's the border and customs patrol element, anything that props up the nation, they believe is wrong. And see, in America, and we're getting to modern day politics, and that really is not really where I want to go, but they see state governments as just local regional governing elements. And so they want to, we want to include Quebec and various states in Canada and various states in Mexico, and just continue all this out. These are just administrative, local legislative zones. They want to, and they value residency over citizenship in a nation. So they believe anything that limits the moving of people to change their residency is inherently racism. Well, we can see patriotism and nationalism in America is not based on race. White, as in white power. I don't want to say that for the YouTube algorithms too much, but white, whatever you want to call it, is a construct which Hitler would agree that is an American construct. What is white? because does white include if you have a Hispanic surname? Oh, no, you can be Mexican and be white. But you're not white, you're Mexican. So you're not white. So you're people of color, even though you're lighter than somebody living in, Maine. No, it's a construct initially by anti-black racists who want to make a coalition with just about everybody by that point, even Catholics, everybody but Jews. Because, well, traditionally outside of Louisiana, the South was very anti-Catholic, very pro-Protestant. But that's another story we could get into. So we can see the idea of a national identity is not a racial identity. But to Hitler, it is one and the same. Hitler's it's a racial, it's a blood, it's a genetic thing that he is trying to promote out. So anything that does not benefit, does not come in lines with his views of what is good for the Germans, will be taken over. But he does not want, say, one aircraft company all making the same aircraft. He wants a Focke-Wulf, and he wants an ME 109 or BF 109, Focke-Wulf 190 and the 109. He wants the competing design teams out there building their own things, competing against each other in an unplanned economy. Hitler is not for a centrally planned economy. Now, you go, oh, gamer, the 4-year plan. Yeah, the 4-year plan is a planning for the coming wars. I want to push plural. It ends up being a war, but coming wars. And it is pushing for to get the necessary manufacturing, primarily resources for the manufacturing within Germany going, but also manufacturing capabilities. So it is if there is non-compliance with the basic requirements of the race, then your factory will be taken over. If you are the wrong type of person who owns a factory, Jews, communists, or potentially foreigners, though there are foreign-owned factories, and they do not nationalize, to the best of my knowledge, at least the great bulk of the foreign-owned factories, including ones owned by Henry Ford and such, the Ford factory. Obviously, it is run for the benefit of the war economy during the war, but it is not nationalized. So Hitler's National Socialism is not the planned economy ideal of fascism. It is maybe fascistic in some of its things, but that's sort of like socialistic in things, but it is not fascism. It is not Marxist socialism. It is National Socialism as expressed by Hitler and other Nazi thinkers. And there is conflict within the National Socialist Party as to what it should be. And so this does, to a point. Thank you, motorcycle, for driving by very noisily in the middle of this video. Sorry about that. I hope to be building a new studio soon that will get rid of some of that stuff. But I know this is going long, sorry. But I think it is an important part, and he's looking at, TIK is looking at some of these elements. And he talks about, and I've only sort of skimmed his why they don't teach it, but I was generally agreeing. Hitler had a Marxist view of economies, in that economies are zero-sum games. A Marxist, a socialist, believes that if I have 5 ounces of gold, that could mean that that means that I've denied 4 other people from having 1 ounce of gold as well, and that is wealth. A socialist, a Marxist, a socialist, I'm saying those as 2 different things, believes that economies are finite, zero-sum games, and for me to have more means somebody else has to have less. That is not how economies work, okay? If you're looking at, well, you can even look at pre-monetary economies, and I'm thinking of the Middle Ages. Yes, they had money back then, but a lot of the taxes and other things were paid in wheat and other products and not necessarily in coinage, in money. You can add your labor to something and make it more valuable. Say if you were to build a mill, often a mill is used to grind wheat or other grains into flour. Could be a windmill, could be a water mill. But if you were to build a mill, once you build that mill, you've increased the economic activity of that region, is because every day, because if you look at in the Middle Ages economy, women needed to work in the home. No, you're being a sexist, gamer. Nope. Women needed to work in the home because maybe after breakfast or whatever, at some point, they needed to get on that grinding stone and start grinding that wheat to make the bread, because they didn't have, well, who was going to create the flour? No, that woman had to start putting in putting wheat on it and daily grinding wheat grain to flour. Okay, and so if every day for your family a woman has to spend, I don't know, let's just say 2 hours grinding wheat, that means she can't do anything else during that 2 hours. She can only grind the wheat. But if you have a mill in your town in which you can take your barrel of wheat or your bag of wheat and pour it into a mill and have it ground in 2 minutes, your week's worth of grinding, and say the wheat would last for, storing wheat is harder to store and not have it go bad than grain, but have your wheat ground for the week in just a few minutes. And you might not get your exact wheat that you poured in. You might get the 3 bags earlier, but you're contributing. You get your allotment of wheat back out. You have now freed up that woman 14 hours, because you have to do it every day. Can't skip a day of grinding. You don't get the days off. You got to grind every day. Or you got to grind a little bit more some days so you don't have to do the other days, but you get my point. So you've now increased the economic activities of that community by having a mill that grinds your grains, that you no longer have to do it by hand. Okay? This is why economies are not zero-sum gains. The person who, whether it can be a collective community, so this is where we get back to that complete individual to total collective community at the other extreme. Somewhere along there can be a community gets together and builds a mill. It can be an individual who somehow, they often want to say, through exploiting others, but doesn't need to be exploiting others, gets enough money that hires people to build the mill for them or whatever it is. But once you get that mill, the person who owns that mill, and they may have been, hey, everybody in the community, if you help me build the mill, for the next 6 months you'll get free grinding of your grain. After that I'll charge you, but you'll get 6 months for free. and that'll be a good deal, or whatever it may be. But once he gets that, him making money off of grinding grain does not mean that the other people living in that town or in that village or region are any less wealthy than they were before, because the way they pay for grinding the grain is to give a little bit of that flour to the mill owner, and they can then go out and they can earn money by working other job elements within the agrarian economy those women can do, and so that they can make more money, but it is nowhere near the amount of the 14 hours a week or whatever it would be to grind the grain and deal with all of that stuff. And then when you add a baker to that, she is no longer baking bread in the home every day, which if you look at the medieval baking situation versus the more modern, it takes a lot more effort to do that, heating up that oven beforehand and all that stuff. So you now have a baker. So you're now freeing up your increasing economic activities. Economies are not zero-sum games. Because one person is rich, because one person has a fancy jewel on his clothing, does not mean that he has denied wealth to others. Now, if there's only 5 of those fancy jewels in the existence, yes, he's denied somebody else wearing that jewel, but that's fine because that's a luxury item and not a daily requirement. So, yes, a socialist, a Marxist, and a National Socialist believes very much in shrinking markets that TIK talks about. That is part of Hitler's belief, is the markets and needing requirements for food versus industrial capacity and all of that, where he is right that Hitler does worry about these things, but they are the more effects than the causes, in my opinion, because he is wanting to turn it around. Is Hitler creates an autarky, so it forces them into the war, as opposed to they're going for the war, so he creates the autarkies or whatever. Going around which order is these things is Hitler wants to unite the Germans and get rid of the real enemy of the Jews. Now, the Jews are dangerous not just because, as TIK focuses on, as either supporting capitalism, which Hitler believes is going to collapse society into class warfare. Hitler really buys into a lot of Marxism, though he's not a Marxist. Or, since Marx is a Jew, the Jews want to control things through Marxism after the economies collapse. So, and through a limited economy, but a proper capitalist who understands, coming out of Adam Smith, is that economies are not, they can be autarkies, they can be mercantilist systems. So that is an important element to them, but is not required to be and is not a zero-sum game. Now, national protections to your economy are not anti-capitalistic, because, and I did not get into a second video, I may do another reaction to that if there's enough interest, but because it's not just a matter of labor is cheaper in India than in the US, so Indian-made goods are cheaper than American-made goods, so capitalism flows. No, the problem with some of that, and often in American theories, is that places, yes, sometimes the labor is cheaper, but we can come back to China, where I know it to be a fact. The government will run businesses at a loss in China because multiple reasons, but a major reason is to simply keep employment going so that they may have a business that makes a widget, whether it's sold in China or sold overseas. They don't want to shut down that factory for inefficiency because it'll put 1,000 people or whatever it is out of work. So they keep these factories going. These are often state-owned factories. There are, even though there's a lot of state capitalism in the sense of allowing private ownership, shall we say, though it's conditional to, again, to the needs of the overall state ownership. But they will keep these businesses that are state-owned and operated in business just to keep people employed. So you have goods being sold cheaper than they are to be sold cheaper than they are required to be made and transported and all of that element, as well as currency manipulations in artificially keeping Chinese currencies low so that the comparative cost, not the actual cost, but the comparative cost to goods moving around is artificially low because of the currency controls. People often throw around the word free trade. If you were to add one basically more word for it, then you would be reasonably correct in it. Free and fair trade. That is good. That will give, say, competition between Canada and the US, but as you can see in Canada, I know Trump was pushing it. Canada has artificial protections for its dairy industry versus the American dairy industry, and milk products are more expensive in Canada than they are in the US, even with the various natural costs between the US and Canadian dollars. US people would happily sell milk into Canada for what the Canadians would pay in Canadian dollars for the milk, but they are limited by law to protect Canadian dairy farmers. That may be a good deal for Canada and may be required for Canada to protect its dairy farmers, but that does not mean it is a free and fair trade. And so similar protections, because we can't entirely rely upon imports. You must have, if you're going to have imports, you must, because again, bring it back to TIK. Hitler, they talk about this, and TIK is very right, is that if you are building a tank and you're not exporting that tank, you're also not selling that tank to Hans down the road for him to own his own tank. See, if you were building a car, you could sell it to Hans down the road, or you could export it. You can export a tank, true, but they're trying to build up the German army. If you're building up a tank and you're spending money on building up a tank, you can't use that elements to trade balance for importation for either goods, services, or resources from outside of your country. So if Germany is building radios or building cars and are exporting them, that can get them foreign exchange that then can allow them to import oil, food, and other things. But if they are primarily doing it on an economic element that is not spreadable through society, meaning arms, you have to artificially, because you're paying those workers then want to go out and buy something. If there's nothing to buy, that causes inflation. The Nazis knew about inflation from two periods during the Weimar Republic with radical inflation. So they are trying to manage, not have a centrally planned economy, but trying to manage the economy to allow rapid and massive rearmament in Germany. And no, they did not want the war starting in 1939. They wanted the war versus France and Britain, because they figured they would end up having to fight them both together. They wanted that in 42 or 43. So I disagree with TIK in that he started the war in 39 because of economic needs. If that is the conclusion you take from his video, I disagree with it. I do agree that Hitler was looking at economies, that he wanted to fight wars. It was a military invasion of Austria, folks. It was an unopposed military invasion of Austria, and then a few days later, because they invade before they can hold, before the Fatherland Front can hold the plebiscite on whether they should join with Nazi Germany or not, they then hold the vote after the invasion. That is a military invasion, an unopposed military invasion, but it is a military invasion. The Sudetenland, that more, or there are combats going on by Freikorps that the primarily set up by the SS, that are made up of Sudeten radicals that are supporting, unification with Germany. So there is fighting over the Sudetenland, but that is mostly Czechoslovakia giving up the land because Chamberlain tells them that they can't fight at this time. The later invasion in early 39 of the rest of Czechoslovakia is also a military invasion that is unopposed. Hitler believes, because Britain and France did not stand up against Austria, did not stand up against, stand up for Czechoslovakia, he believes they're not going to stand up over Poland, stand in support of them, but he is worried about the Soviet Union, and he is unwilling to go to war with a major power in 1939. Again, Hitler is unwilling to go to war with a major power in 1939. He sets up the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact to assure that he does not go to war with a major power in 1939. Oops. He didn't think they would fight. He didn't think they would fight. Hitler made a mistake. Hitler did the actions that caused the war to start. Absolutely. It is Hitler's fault that the war started. The World War started. Of course, Hitler ordered the invasion of Poland, and the Poles resisted. But it is either Hitler starting it in March 1938 with his invasion of Austria, or, it could be 36 when Hitler remilitarizes the Rhineland, or 35 when he's taking the Saarland, or whatever, breaking the Treaty of Versailles. And it's just a slow build-up burn to it. So it's either there, or it's Britain, and then France following along, turning it into a world war when they come to the aid of Poland. So I know this has taken some twists and turns. You get to see how my mind works. Again, if you haven't already, please like this video. If you dislike it, fine, but tell me why you dislike it, especially if you got to this point. Tell me where you think I'm wrong. I do like those kind of comments. I will do my best to address them. Let me know on that. And if you haven't already, give it a like. Share this out on other social media platforms. That is really important. Thank you for watching. See you next time.